What's
How's it
up?
going, everybody? We welcome to Explain Yourself. I'm here with my pal Ben, and we're going to be talking to you guys about some really cool stuff. But before we do, we wanted to tell you guys a little bit about archetypes. Ben, we have a really cool magazine that's going to be dropping here in February for everybody. It features 3 new comic books, marketing tips, writing tools, all kinds of really cool working things that you can use for the comic book creative. And all you got to do is head over to geekcollective.net/archetypes and you can check that out. We're going to throw on the trailer for you guys to check that out here. And then we're going to play the intro right after that. So we'll see you guys right here, right afterwards.
All right.
What's
What's up? It is Sunday night, so it's time for another episode of Explain Yourself. We have a great creator here today to talk about a cool book called Wardens. So I want to welcome Ari Gross onto the show.
Hey, everybody.
Ari, how's it going?
Ari, how's it going?
It's going great. How's it going, guys?
Doing good. Can't complain.
Fantastic.
I love
Yeah.
that. I haven't seen your intro before. It's very like Sports Center, like
It is.
Hey, that's perfect, right? Because hashtag NFL is going on right now.
Absolutely.
My Niners are going to be heading. They're 1 game away, so that's pretty freaking awesome. So heck yeah. Let's talk a little bit about Wardens really quick. If you can give us a quick pitch on the book, and then we'll get right back. We'll get right into it.
Sure. All right. Wardens, 1926, Toronto, multicultural immigrant neighborhood called The Ward. Jewish seamstress Rachel Tussman was working at a factory trying to figure out where her life's going. She's happy to be in a place that's safe, but doesn't see much of a future. There's a huge labor issues, wealth disparity and all that. And suddenly everything takes a sharp left turn when there's a fire at the place where she works and gives rise to this new supernatural a vengeful creature known as the Shmata, a combination of angry souls and born out of bitterness and Jewish Kabbalistic magic. And then Rachel has to work with her sister's secret boyfriend, secret Chinese boyfriend, a black jazz trombonist, and a few other people in the ward to come together, deal with the supernatural threat of the Shmata, and find a way to bridge the gaps between the various communities and stop the ward from tearing itself apart in a gang war.
Very cool. That is the description, all right. So I'm going to bring the campaign up on the screen here.
Yeah.
And ask you a few questions about it. The first thing, this is funny. I was kind of going through your campaign page yesterday before I set up the stream. And I was looking at this piece of artwork, and I'm like, I know I've seen that. That's something I've seen before. I couldn't figure it out until I got to the bottom of the page, but I would never have figured it out on my own. So tell us a little bit about this image.
So that image, it's an homage to some Mario 3 art. There's the cover of Mario 3 is Mario sort of flying with the Tanuki ears, and there's a bigger art piece where all the Koopa kids are coming down from the castle. My artist, Rob Jennings, is super obsessed with 80s and 90s video games, as am I. And he initially pitched this as one of the covers. I wanted the cover to be something a little different, and I was like, well, let's keep that back in our mind for either a variant cover or an art print, and I decided that we'll just do one cover for this, so that sort of became the art print. And I'm changing the rewards a little bit, since I saw no one was buying the art print tier, everyone was buying the 2-copy backer tier. So I'm throwing that in that tier so it can be in more tiers, because I want people to have this thing, because I printed out and looked at it and I was like, this is dope. Everyone should have this. So
Really cool.
It is. And, we usually kind of do the creative stuff first a little bit and then kind of go into the marketing. But I jump ahead here. I've been looking at more and more Kickstarter campaigns and seeing like the ones that stand out seem to be doing well. I think you just, that first thumbnail image that people see when they're scrolling through comics or related projects is just so vitally important. And I think it's kind of cool that you have something, it's a really nice piece of art in its own. It's appealing. It's got a lot of things going on that, without getting too overwhelming, that you can look at and be like, yeah, there's some cool stuff here. This is going to be fun. But I think just the fact that you have like, this was a really sticky piece of artwork in my mind, because I was just like, what is that? I know I've seen that image before, kind of. And it really, kind of drew me in. So kudos to you guys for, I think, coming up with a great campaign image. As I'm getting my campaigns together for this year, I'm almost just going to do thumbnails, like pieces of art just for those, not necessarily taking something for the comic.
That's the best way to do it, right? Is to create a thumbnail just exclusively for this thing. Because it's so difficult to pinpoint, like to grab something from the comic book to put in there and then to write it within the amount of characters that they give you for to like hook people, right? So it's so difficult. We'll get into all that good stuff. But let's start scrolling through some of this and talking a little bit about some of the rewards. So tell us a little bit about what you're offering to everybody.
Right. So Wardens is a 44-page comic, color, obviously. It's has, I think, about 4 pages of back matter, essays, characters, sketches, and stuff like that. So it's going to be thick for a single issue comic. I have the whole story is broken up into 6 44-page segments. I did a first draft of the whole thing, so I know exactly where it's going. Change some details as we go along and all that. But this is distinctly a chapter 1 of 6 for the first story about the whole team, how they come together, and all that. So the actual rewards are digital print, no surprise there. Physical copy, again, pretty expected. I've been doing some trading cards. I did for my last Kickstarter campaign, which was my first Kickstarter campaign 1 year ago. I did a series of trading cards for the characters from that was called Awakening. And I really like these. I've been obsessed with like these Marvel and DC, but mostly like the Marvel trading cards as a kid. And so I wanted to do that once I started doing this. So I got that.
What's funny about that is those trading cards are like, people eat them up, right, Ben? Like you and I both experimented with in multiple campaigns with those. And they're really fun to collect. I got some things like that. I got metal cards. I have all kinds of really cool ones. So it's really exciting to kind of see that people continue to do this. Let's see what else you guys. What else are you doing that is kind of standing out from everything from the rest?
So there's those 2 postcards, which there's just easy things to print in there. I figured I'd include one in the tier. The next thing is that Mario 3 inspired art print, which, like I mentioned, I just changed the tiers a little bit because everyone. I noticed that a bunch of people were getting I have a 2 comic pack tier, and everyone was getting that. No one was getting the art print tier, so I said, forget it. That one there that you just see there, I'm just throwing the art print in there because I want people to have it. I want it. I think it's great. The other things that are stand out of this, the 2 higher tiers, that one there, a 1920 style, I said 20 style art print, but I should rename that to 1920 style character sketch. This is you and or a friend. Our artist will draw you in his style as sticking with the 1920s theme, which is, of course, when Wardens is set. And he's got some pretty cool sketches that he did of everyone in the team. If you scroll down to the main story, you'll see like the main part, not even the rewards, like in the middle, you'll see right there. Yeah. That's me, my editor, and the artist. I love how he drew us, and I think this is an awesome opportunity for people to have a unique family portrait or whatever they want to do. And the biggest tier is getting drawn into issue 2. There's a lot of people in issue 2. I think it'd be a lot of fun if someone wanted their character, especially their character that they had designed for the character design, then go into the story. I've got the perfect place for all that. So those are the higher level tiers.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I'm always curious. I'm thinking of doing cameo tier in my next comic because I'm going to have a
Cameo,
gazillion
that's the
side
term.
characters.
Thank you.
So I'm wondering, I'm curious to see how that does.
Those ones are always really fun. I've always wanted to be able to do something like that, but I could never afford it.
The biggest question I had, and this is something that I think is going to be sort of an ongoing question as I do more of these, because like I said, this is part one and there's a minimum of 6 for these, is going to be figuring out what the good high level tiers are, what sells and what people want. Because I went into this thinking that, oh yeah, the cameo tier is going to be great. Everyone's going to jump on it day one. But no one's bid yet. No one's even bid at the second level tier. And I'm wondering, is that a pricing thing? Is that a time of the year thing? Is that
What is it set at?
like, what's the deal? I don't think, like, I mean, it's the prices are in Canadian dollars, so for most Americans, it's actually not that expensive. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens at the end of the campaign. The last campaign I had, we had some original art tiers as well, where my artist was going to do some original art. I didn't think anyone was going to take them until the end of the campaign, and then we had 3. So, you know, like, you don't know till it's done.
Yeah.
It's a continuous learning process. So yeah.
Yeah, cool. So I'm a big history buff, and I kind of noticed that you've got a lot of elements I've seen. I don't know too much about what Toronto was like at this time. I know a lot about what New York City and some places in America were like. Is kind of the situations these characters are in. They remind me a lot of other books I've read where their characters are kind of working at like shirt factories in New York City or something like that. Was there a lot of that in Toronto? Did you base a lot of research? Did you base a lot of the situations on research that you've done?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm sort of a historian amongst other things by trade. I have a PhD in the history and philosophy of science and technology, one of these weird overeducated people who eventually found a total different discipline to go into, and none of that trained me for drawing comics or writing comics. But
well, that doesn't happen.
Yeah. So a lot of what I was doing early on for the comic is getting the inspirations for the setting and for the types of jobs that people would have. I mean, so for example, the main character, Rachel, she's a seamstress. Her sister working at the same factory is a receptionist. Her sister's boyfriend is a porter, just carrying stuff around and and even then you have to get into the, like, what are the labor issues of the time? What are the actual jobs that people have and how are they paid? How many hours do they work? I mean, I did a lot of research for all that. And then from a historical research perspective, it's always about finding the balance between when you do like enough research that you can move forward, but without making it all about the research and not about the characters. Because at the end of the day, a good story is a character-driven story. This is a character-driven story. It's not like there's a plot there. The plot's fun. There's a supernatural hook. That's fun too. But if you don't have the characters, you don't have anything. And so figuring out how to balance compelling characters with all this cool historical stuff that you want to put in there, but you often have to keep a lot of the stuff out. So, for example, you see there the factory, it gets caught on fire. Of course, that's directly inspired by many of New York, there's the famous the Triangle factory. Is that the one I'm thinking of in New York? That famous
there's Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, yeah.
Yes, the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, precisely. There's a very similar thing that happened in Toronto, not exactly the same time, but again, garment factory was not kept the way it should be, certainly not by modern standards, burnt down. Several people died, all of them immigrants, Jewish, Italian, like the same kind of stories. So the ward itself, where this is based, is probably the most similar to the Lower East Side for Americans if you're trying to place it somewhere. It was the poor immigrant neighborhood, came around in the mid-19th century, but really as of the late 19th century to the 1950s, and more towards the beginning of that. Toronto, like many places or many cities in North America, especially Montreal and New York, had a pretty big influx of immigrants. A lot of Jews from Eastern Europe, Ashkenazi Jews, which were a bit of the people who were coming were different from the Jews who were there before, who were mostly from Britain or Germany. They were much more secular, much more integrated, tend to be wealthier. These were basically the sort of the poor Eastern European Jews who were like tired of getting killed and kicked out of places, so they left. Literally, my ancestors. I mean, a lot of this is very based on family history. A lot of the names are just taken from people in my family. Shuffled around a little bit, but a lot of the stories are adapted from either things that's happened to me or happened to people I know in other parts of my family or people came across in my research. So it really focuses on this community where you have a large influx of people from Eastern Europe, a lot of Jews, a lot of people from China, a lot of Chinese immigrants. And at this point, the Chinese Exclusion Act had been passed, so they weren't even like allowing any more Chinese people. So that's a huge point of contention in later issues. We'll get to that. And then lots of Italians, Southern Europeans, Eastern Europeans. I mean, the word was the multicultural neighborhood where all the sort of the rest of the white Anglo Toronto, like just didn't want to go. This was where all like, you know, all the rabble is there, you know, and it was the slums. It was overcrowded, rough housing, poor sanitation. People were literally commissioned by the city to go and take pictures of poor people in the ward in overcrowding situations so they could go and use it as like political arguments for, you know, different municipal policies. This was like the rough part of the city, which is kind of hilarious because if you ask, where's the ward now? This is where every bank headquarters in Canada is located. This is where every financial institution, this is like the richest part of Canada, like per square block, except for like, I don't know, maybe the Thompson family or like some billionaire family, private home or something. This area got totally changed basically after the 1950s. A bunch of land was expropriated, parts were cleared to build the new city hall, Toronto's first Chinatown. People basically kicked out everyone along Elizabeth Street for a section which was the very first Chinatown. People ended up moving other places. They put City Hall there, and slowly, there's nothing left of this neighborhood in terms of like how it was, which makes it really interesting to me. It's this place that people in Toronto know in terms of like we know the streets, but we don't know how it was. It's like as if if you made a comic called like Wall Street or something, but everyone was living in like shacks, you know. It's that sort of like contrast, which I sort of want to, which I find really interesting. And it's a total lost neighborhood, but there's been a lot of research on it in the past 10 years or so. A lot of people have been getting interested in it again. So there's been a lot of really cool resources that I've been able to use to tell these stories.
Wow, that's interesting. So I would have guessed the way it goes with most cities I've been familiar with is, you know, the areas that were really run down are just end up being like the up and coming hip neighborhoods. I mean, that's like Williamsburg and Brooklyn, or even in Cincinnati, there was an area called Over the Rhine that was just like the worst part consistently for years and years. And now it is like $500,000 condos, restaurants everywhere. It usually happens organically, but there are a few spots, and that is interesting, where, you know, government developers just got in there and said, no, half this is going away. In fact, the area in New York where they built the UN headquarters was its own neighborhood that they just essentially bulldozed. And they just dumped the whole area somewhere out in Jamaica Bay. But the trash still washes up on the bay there. So
really?
There aren't a lot of places. That's interesting. I would have assumed it just kind of organically became a very different thing, but that's a little, there's some sadness there when it sort of happened.
By the time
organically.
By the time the 1950s and 60s rolled around, a lot of the early immigrant groups that had been there had already moved out. Like the Jewish community, and this was the center of the Jewish community in Toronto in the early 20th century. But people started slowly moving west and then further north. That as people got rich, they left the slums. And, you know, slowly there's like, I wouldn't say gentrification, but like it got a little less rough. But that sort of became a very sharp turn in around the 50s and 60s when the government was like, we're just buying all this land to put a thing here. I actually don't know how a lot of, even some parts of the ward were probably a little rougher, a little later. Like, I mean, there's parts of downtown Toronto that are like a little skeezier, but like not that skeezy, like compared to a lot of places. It's a lot of money there. Like if there's people sleeping on the streets, it's only because there's a nice vent in front of this bank. You know what I mean? It's that kind of place now. It's a very downtown feel. Where this used to be, people lived there because the factories were like right over there. You know, you're making the factories over there. The stores that sold the stuff that the factories made, in particular Eaton's, which is the major place, which I've changed for the book because Eaton's has become Stone's for you know, just historical fiction reasons. But people would live like here, work here, and then the stuff would be sold in this department store that's right over there that still exists today.
Oh wow.
It's totally changed, of course. Like, it's not like it was back in the 20s or anything, but that's the only thing that stayed. The factory's gone and the living places have gone, but there's still like a little bit of a semblance of like the history if you know what to look for. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very cool. So one other thing I had in my notes here that I wanted to, I guess, bring up, not necessarily ask you about, but if you have anything that went into this decision, I'd like to hear it. I've always found it kind of hard to decide what preview pages to put in, to your campaign page. You don't want to give away too much. You don't want to not give away enough that people aren't intrigued. I always find that, especially if you're a new creator, you don't have a huge, track record, and especially if it's a new book as well, I always want to err on the side of, giving people more. You've got a lot of pages here. What I think was really cool about what you had here, and I want to know if it's a happy accident or if it was really intentional, is I think you've given us all the cool things that we can expect in this project. I see like, okay, there's going to be like kind of historical fiction here, great artwork. You're going to have a fun scene like this. You're going to have all these colorful characters and scenes. You kind of forget about the supernatural fire guy, who I'm going to ask you about in a little bit. But, we have enough here to get kind of caught up in these people's lives and their situations. We have some action, so it's not like it's just all set up. Then the fire, and then the last page we see is this guy, and it's also the only one that's a single page, so it kind of has a little more punch. Yeah. I thought this was really cool. This almost, if I were cutting together a trailer for this comic, with what I know about it now, that's what I would do. I would kind of like, okay, here's some cool stuff, and then, oh, bam, there's going to be this other very intense thing. So I think I'm always looking at with my stories is there enough here? I'll have like a couple cool ideas that I think are interesting, but probably not enough to carry a whole book. Sometimes I can mesh them together, and I'm like, yeah, that is enough. I look at this and just the pages you showed us, and I think there's a lot. You've really given us all the cool draws of this book. There's going to be great artwork, interesting characters, kind of fun stuff, and then also a pretty dramatic villain antagonist or whatever this guy's situation ends up being. So I thought, did you really plan out like that flow when you were doing this, or did you kind of just want to pick the coolest pages and it turned out to be this?
Yeah, this wasn't an accident. The big question for me was, so I know this is a 44-page book, so lots of material to work from already. If this was a 20-page book, you would have to be a little more judicious, right? I know it. I didn't want to give away the last 8 pages because the last 8 pages are very spoilery. But because I talk about this character, this is like, it sort of tells the arc from, starting in with sort of the personal issues, getting to a little more of the fun and games, getting to a little bit of the action, and then you have this, which sort of like, the villain enters essentially. If I started this with the first 6 pages, frankly, I would have just bored myself because first 6 pages, which I like, are very scene setting. They're very much just sort of like trying to understand like the community, understand sort of the Jewish side of the community. A lot of it's like a rabbi lecturing in a synagogue, which like, again, sets the tone, tells you kind of thematically the main issues about it, but it's not the most exciting and it's not going to give you the general arc of the first issue. So as you can tell, that's why I listed the page numbers underneath them, because I don't want people thinking I'm just doing like, pages 1 to 10 or something like that. Because, you need to know I'm jumping around a little bit because I really wanted to get people to see in a very, very rough idea of what the sort of general arc of the first issue is, without giving away any of the major spoilers that come in the last in the final act 3 of the issue.
Yeah, very cool. I think that's something, and this is the issue 1 problem, I think, for everybody I talk to and myself too. Like, it's really hard to know how to start your story because, if you're going to be pitching this to an editor or even to a Kickstarter audience, you're going to have that moment where it's like, okay, something's got to happen pretty early. That's not, if you look at most movies that are really good, it doesn't start off with necessarily the biggest action scene. Like, you kind of do the James Bond thing where he's wrapping up a previous adventure. That only works if you kind of know the characters already. You can do the thing where it's like, it's an intense scene and then it cuts to like 2 days before, and like the in media res thing, which
flash forward. And I did think about that in this issue. An earlier version had a flash forward with a big fight from like issue 6, like the final fight with all the gang as they've all come together. They're dealing with the Schmata, and you hear all these voices, and you're trying to figure out like who even is this. And I put it to my editor, and she was like, "Yeah, I don't think you need it." And I was kind of surprised because I thought I did. I thought you need to like start out with a bang, be like, bam, right there. But the more I thought about it, the more I was like, you know what, that would be a way to do things, but I kind of want to just have a slower build where the first pages set the actual tone of like the main themes for the story and introduce the characters kind of gently. Because once it gets going, it really gets going. And I mean, I was thinking back to some of my favorite movies, like, I mean, The Shining. Shining doesn't start off with like, you know, chopping down a door and then blink, one month.
Yeah.
You know, like that's not Stanley Kubrick style. Like, you know, so I was like, yeah, I can make it work. And I think I did. Whether or not anyone else thinks I did is a matter of opinion, I'm sure. But certainly in terms of the pages, I decided to skip around a bit more to really give people the high level view of the arc of the story and some of the things they can expect. You should expect there to be some action. You should expect there to be some drama. There's a thing on fire. You should expect there to be an interesting villain. There's this interpersonal issues. You know, there's the stuff with, you know, Rachel sees that her sister's dating a Chinese guy and she doesn't know how to feel about that. You know, there's all this, like there's enough of a flavor of what people can get out of it that if they look at it and they say, yeah, that looks like a cool, interesting story, then the rest is not just filling in the gaps, but like that's what it is, you know. That's what I'm selling. So yeah.
And I think that's it's clear you have a lot to sell here, which I think is good. You've got kind of all the things I listed before, the historical fiction. You can tell it's researched. You see all the big draws of this book are here, and that's, I think, good to do, especially if you're like you said, like your editor said. I think you had enough here, and I look at most things I like. They do kind of start off slow. I don't want to knock other stuff, but that whole like the flash forward intro, which I've seen a lot of, I generally, unless a character is like a plot point, they're seeing the future, that is okay, but I generally hate that as a writing device. So because I always focus on kind of how do things flow, how's the momentum build up, and it's generally better just to start off slow and get to know these characters, become invested as the stakes get higher. And so I think that's generally always the way to go. But I always worry. There's always this voice in my head says like, I imagine someone reading this for the first time, not necessarily knowing what to think and being like, wait, when's something going to happen? Is there going to be action in the first 10 pages? And I'm like, that's rough. I don't know.
I mean, part of that's why I put right in there a supernatural action comic series, you know, because I want people to know that's where we're going. Like, you know, that's every issue, there's action and there's a supernatural thing. Like it's, you know, I could have called it historical fiction, you know, like relationship, people trying to figure out how to navigate their lives, kind of like no one wants that, you know, like that's there too.
Probably not what Stan Lee would have said.
No, it's not what Stan Lee would have said. I'm really trying to channel my Stan Lee here because someone can sell comics, you know, like I could.
This is awesome. We're gonna take a quick break right here, really quick. But we're gonna get, as soon as we come back, we're gonna talk a little bit about some stuff. Maybe get a little bit more into marketing stuff because we were talking about that. You know, trying to work in enough characters into that title, and you got a really cool one. So I want people to be able to hear this one, and then we'll talk a little bit about more marketing here right after this message. All right, everybody, this is the part of the show where we're going to talk a little bit about Greylock really quick before we get back with Ari Gross, where we have a code for Previews World. Our friend Eli Shockey of the show, he's got a book that's going to be dropping out here. So make sure you guys are heading over to your favorite LCS, or if you guys are ordering straight from Previews World, use January code JAN 241939 and grab the Greylock issue 3 from Scout Comics. That's JAN 241939. And those of you who are watching, you guys can point your camera to the screen right now and use that QR code to pre-order your book today. And we'll see you guys. We'll come back back here with Ari Gross. Ari, let's talk a little bit about that pitch that you got, man, here If you could give it to us really quick, and then tell us why you chose this one, and because you were talking a little bit about it before the break.
Sorry, which pitch? The what I have
The
written?
log line that you got on Kickstarter.
What do I have written? Read it to me, please. I totally
You
forgot.
got 44-page comic book of supernatural Prohibition era Jewish and Chinese Canadian face punching good time.
Yeah, that sounds like me. Yeah. So it has all the things I want to say. It has what it is. It has how long it is. It has the kind of all the characters, but a good number of characters. You can understand they're going to be Jewish and or Chinese Canadian. And it has a face-punching good time, because I want people to come at this series thinking a couple of things. First, it's got action. This isn't just a relationship sort of drama thing. There's high action, there's suspense, there's villains, there's all that kind of stuff. And it is a good time. Wardens is not a drag. If there's one thing that was my North Star, my guiding light for this series, was this series has to be fun, has to be upbeat. That informed the writing. It formed the art, it informed the pacing. All of it was driven by the fact that I do not want to write a series about people living, about like immigrants living in the slums and being sad. You know, there's sadness in it, there's tragedy, there's death, there's hardship, but that's not what this is. This isn't about telling a sad story. This is about telling a crazy upbeat story set in a place where people have legit hardships. And there happens to be some face punching, because Rachel's good at punching people in the face. That's one thing I really like about her character is Rachel and her sister. They're very different characters, and that's something I wanted to do. I mean, it's a classic, you know, two sisters or two siblings, different as can be, right? Like oldest story ever, right? You know, Frozen, whatever, it gets repeated everywhere. But you know, Rachel, Goldie's the one. She's got all the looks. She's got all the luck with men. She's the receptionist. She's the face of the company. She's very good with people. Rachel's not that. She's the brash, can't be bothered to figure out how to say it nicely. Lay a hand on her, she'll whack your hand away. You know, short, stocky, sort of, you know, muscular. She's actually, I mean, she's based off a lot of people in my family, based off pretty much everyone on my mom's side who sort of looks like that. I don't know if they punched a lot of people in their faces, but they are known for giving people a hell of a hard time. The kind of people who, like, you know, the bank's giving you a hard time, so like you're just gonna like make life more miserable for them until they get, you know, they do it your way. So that kind of personality, you know, the sort of the very like brash, pushy. Goldie is more of the kind, persuasive sort of personality, which is fun to write, because, you know, once you have like, oh, they're sisters and they're opposites, but except for the parts that they have in common, and then you have to show that too, and you know that makes it a lot easier to construct, not only to construct narratives, but to like have deeply interesting and individual people, different personas, different characters that people aren't going to say, oh, this all reads like the same thing. Because another major thing I don't want in my writing is to have the same voice for everyone. People have different diction. They come from, they speak differently. They come from different backgrounds. You know, they have different views on things. People have to sound different. And having a good idea of the type of character you are goes really far in terms of making people sound like they're not just me putting my words in the mouth of other people, because that's not a very interesting story.
Do you like cast your characters? I mean, you obviously said you based Rachel on some people from your family. Do you like sort of cast people in your mind to be the voices of characters? I do that a lot, and it's really helped me, you know, especially if they're very caricaturesque-ish people. It's really helped me develop their voice.
He's talking about me.
Maybe one of these comics someday. But you know, I sort of put it in my head that this character, if it were a movie, would be played by this guy, and I could hear the voice in my head, and it really did help me with all the things you're talking about, in terms of just giving them a different vibe. In fact, someone who had the show last week actually had a co-writer who wrote different characters, and she wrote separate ones. So is there any method you use to go about doing that?
I don't usually cast characters in my head, although Rachel's an exception. Rachel is my head canon for Rachel is I don't know if you've seen the show The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Susie Essman, the manager in the show. She's basically Rachel, just this like super brash person.
I can totally see that.
takes no shit. Yeah, exactly. That's her.
Yeah.
She was sort of like my guiding light. It's kind of like, what would Susie do? Susie would probably answer you in a rude way and then like go off and do whatever she wants to do because you're being stupid. You know, like it's like, oh yeah, I kind of like that character. Like I love that character. Like I love her. You know, like Alex Bornstein who plays her and everything. I think she's great. So that was for her. But for the others, I didn't have so much a specific character in mind, but a set of like coherent traits I wanted. So like Sunny Wu, Sunny is upbeat. He is happy. He's funny. He makes jokes. He's the guy who you want to be around. He's good with languages, so he makes like multilingual jokes when possible. Nick is a little tougher. We don't, just because this issue we don't really see much of him. He's in there. He becomes a major character in the second and third issues when we've got all the stuff that's going on with his life, which is, again, one thing I want. I'll just step back for a sec. One thing I really want to do with the Wardens is show the various communities of the ward, or at least some of the various communities of the ward. I'm sure there's a lot more. Specifically in this story, I'm focusing on Jewish, Chinese, Black, and not even like all the communities, but the communities around the few characters that are there. So in the very first issue, we mostly focus on the Jewish community and Rachel and her sister and where they work and stuff like that. Issue 2, we get into Sunny's story. We get into Nick's story a bit more. And I really want to make it important that everyone has their own things going on. You know, the Jewish community has their issues. The Chinese community has their issues, or like Sunny and his friends, rather. You know, Nick's family, they've got a whole other supernatural thing going on that is not related to anything else, at least not yet, until it becomes very related to everything else. So I wanted to sort of tell these stories about people living, like we live in a city. We live very parallel lives. You know, I may live 3 blocks away from somebody else, or in one house over from somebody else, but usually our lives are just being lived in parallel. You know, we don't intersect that much. And so I wanted this to be a story about how communities that would otherwise be parallel through, you know, a series of bizarre plot stuff have to then get together and work together to sort of, you know, solve these common supernatural problems and eventually form this sort of Ghostbusteries kind of team where, you know, they're going to be the guardians of this neighborhood. And, you know, because they're made up people from different communities, they're not just dealing with one thing or the other thing. And the threats that pass between those various communities, they're more equipped to deal with them. It's a story about people coming together, which I think is a really important, I don't know, like that seems like an important message about people who are doing their own thing, but somehow realize that they don't just have to do their own thing. And in fact, they're better when they don't.
Absolutely.
So we've been talking about characters and the story and all this stuff. Let's kind of switch it a little bit to a little bit of the business side, right? Because that's part of this thing too, right? Because essentially it's a sales thing, right? And we're trying to get this thing going. So talk to us a little bit about how you've been marketing this book and what kind of success you've been seeing.
Right. So I mean, there's the market through. There's the, you know, post on Twitter, post on Instagram, that kind of thing, social media stuff. I've been making reels, been way more active on any social media than I have previously for this. I'm not a big social media guy just in general. I just don't, it doesn't energize me the way that energizes some people. And I like to have very directed activities. Like if I don't like just scrolling forever. I mean, I have done it. And because I've done it, I realize that it's a thing that I don't like doing because it's not sort of good for me mentally. I like creating things. I like, you know, I'd rather play piano for half an hour and just jam on a keyboard with like no music in front of me, just playing whatever I want, than spend, you know, like 2 hours like flipping through like Instagram or something. So I've been trying very hard to do social media stuff, but it's been more than that. I feel that because this comic is largely, at least the first issue largely takes place in the Jewish community. I've been reaching out to a lot of people in Toronto, in the local sort of history of Toronto scene and the local Toronto Jewish community. There's been some synagogues that I've been in contact with. There was one, I think, Jewish Writers Toronto group that was hosting a thing for their book that someone was like, hey, your thing sounds great. So I piggybacked on that and I spoke to a bunch of people there, maybe 50, 60 people in the room, that kind of thing. Today I went over to a comic cafe, which is in the East End on Queen Street. Which is it's like an hour east of my house by public transport because Toronto is very wide. It's also very long, but it's mostly the wideness that I'm worried about. So it's just like, you know, went there, hung out there for 3 hours. Did I speak to 1 billion people? No. Did I speak to 3? Maybe. you know, but just doing it so that you're here, so that even the next time I'm there, or the third time I'm there, people know me. You know, I know the people who work at the store. Maybe they'll pick up the book. Now I can send them an email back and saying, "Hey, that was great today. It was nice to meet you. Well, you know, what do you think about backing the retailer copy?" Like, the way I see this comic moving, because it is so local and so sort of community specific, is going to be that way. I mean, it would be wonderful if everyone on the internet decided, hey, this is the thing to do right now. But I'm not expecting that.
Yeah.
I mean, I looked at what's succeeding on Kickstarter, and there are considerably fewer tentacles going into considerably few naked orifices for this to be a best-selling Kickstarter hit, based on my very cursory observation of what was getting funded these days. So, you know, I was like, yeah, like I know, you know, I know what's selling, and this is something that's quite niche in terms of setting, not necessarily genre, but in terms of setting. And I appreciate the fact that not everyone who looks at this is going to be like, wow, this is exactly what I want in my life right now. But the people who do want this in their life, they will 100% want this.
I love that. I love that you say that, because that's true, right? Because whatever's out there, right, people will find, if this is one thing that I've always said: if people want it, they'll find a way to get it, right? That's period, right? If I want something, I'll find a way to get it, no matter how, if I have money or not, right? We'll find ways to, if we really want it that bad, we'll figure it out a way. But the thing is, what I hear from you is, I hear that you're stepping out of your comfort zone, that you are trying different things. You are actually going out there and doing things, making yourself seen, and you're doing things out of the norm that you would have if it was kind of a different book. So those things are key, right? Because and it's also consistency, right? Being consistent with all these things, being out there, showing your product, talking about your product. And yeah, I mean, you may not have a win that day, but what the thing is you may have hit that one person and it sits on them overnight, and then who knows, 2-3 days later they might back your campaign, and because you talked to them, oh, that's the guy I knew, because they heard Kickstarter and that was the only thing that stuck, right? Sometimes things like that happen, and they I found him, here he is, I'm gonna check his book out, and then they follow him and they back it. Things crazy like that have happened. So it's getting out there, stepping out of your comfort zone, and doing things, right?
Absolutely. And for me, at least, my philosophy for this book, and in general, is like, I prioritize in person, and anytime I can speak to a person, I think that's much more important than any time I can like text at a person, you know. I mean, I know I can explain the story well. I'm not a super awkward person to talk to. Like, you know, some people are more comfortable doing things virtually or whatever. I get that. But that's, I think, like, I know my strengths as a salesman, as a creative person.
Salesman, right? Salesman, and that's the thing. Like salesman, you can get a person in front of you or on the phone or on camera, and they just know that they're going to close the deal, right?
Yeah. I don't know if I'm always going to close the deal, but I know I'll talk at you until you either close the deal or run away.
Well, the hardest thing for a lot of people, especially creative people, you know, be this artists I know in my day job or even comics people, is a lot of comics people just do not want to, especially in person, talk, or and even have trouble, you know, selling their book or talking about it. You know, that it's just these people, you know, you can think about it all day and night, work on it forever. But you've got to develop those skills to just, you know, you don't have to be, you know, the stereotypical idea of a salesman, and you don't have to be the greatest talker in the world, but you do have to be comfortable with people, and you especially have to be comfortable with talking about your book and finding commonalities with people that might want to back it.
Doing things out of the norm, doing things that are like out of your comfort zone, right? Like you're saying, like being part of the community and doing things that are around, like you can go set up at a or talk to your local library, right? And then because this has to do with the local Jewish community and the different communities that are local to there, right? You can grab other books that could possibly be similar to that, and you know, talk to your library and say, hey, can I do a reading of all these really cool cultural books, and then you know, have your stuff set up off to the side, and not make it a sales pitch, but do it for the community. And hey, I also have this book that's part of the same kind of thing, right? and then giving people different positive things. Maybe you have some resources that people can use that may be looking for from some help. And there's all kinds of really cool stuff that you can do, just stepping out of the norm and doing things for the community and stuff like that, just like you've been saying.
Yeah, you have to definitely be creative, because if you call up someone and be like, "Hi, I've got a comic. I'm doing a Kickstarter thing," to like your library, they'll be like, "Why are you telling me? What is the purpose of this conversation?" And a lot of my, I don't want to say struggles, but a lot of like what I've been having to figure out as I've been doing this campaign is how to like figure out what might be an interesting thing that they would want to do. Because you don't want to send an email that's being like, "I have a thing. What are your thoughts?" Like nobody wants that.
Yeah, just random. Let me do that.
Go away. Like
you can have a reason. Yeah, exactly. And that's one of those things, right? Be aware of like events, be aware of like calendar holidays and things of that nature. If they coincide with what your the theme of your story, right? And you can kind of piggyback on stuff like that. If they have events, local things, they always have things going on locally. They like trade shows and stuff like that. You can always set up, especially if it fits your book, right?
Yeah, it's been having to be creative, which is just an interesting and different challenge, because being creative in terms of the story you're telling is not the same as being creative from a marketing perspective. Mm-hmm. But you got to be both if you want someone to buy your stuff. That's just how it is. Yeah.
To go back to something you said a minute ago, just about when you were describing kind of cold calling somebody, but really thinking of a thing that's of interest to them, not just, I think it's hard enough for a lot of creative people just to be like, okay, I'm going to like call a person and ask them if they want to buy my book or if they're interested. And that's the hardest thing. But really, that's not nearly enough. You've got to be thinking like, okay, what's something about this that person will be interested. You really got to just think about the other person, which is basic empathy in a lot of ways. But you've got to think out like, what's a good way to contact this person? What's a good time? What's their interest? And also, how can I phrase this or set this interaction up in a way that
just like the same way that you had to figure out a hook to pull people in for this Kickstarter, right? You have to do the same thing in that line, right? Because when these people that are on the other end that are receiving these emails, right? So if you have a media list of like, let's say news people or journalists or you're like a local newspaper and local things like that, they see pitches all the time, all day long in their email, right? So they may only have 1 to 2 seconds to kind of look over something and skim and say, nope, not good. No. Okay, this is good enough to go on air, right? So you want to be able to have a good reason to go on air, right? And if we're going to use that as like a metaphor or whatever, your air can be anything, right? If you're going to go on air, you can go, in person, or go to a trade show, or go show your work, or go on social media. You just got to have a reason to hook people.
Yeah, which is all like, just understand who you're talking to, understand a little bit of what kind of things they might do. And, people are generally happy to work with other people, especially if it's the kind of thing that closely aligns with what they do. Something like a comic store is often happy to have a comic writer come in there and talk about their comics, but sometimes you have to figure out how to get there, because if you're just, you're emailing like info or whatever, they're like, I spent all my days dealing with orders. Like, I'm not dealing with this guy. I have actual work to do, which is going to make me actual money. Like these are busy people, right? Comic store operators are not like just sitting on their hands all day waiting for something to happen. Like, they're working. So it's trying to reduce the amount of work that they have to do to meet you at whatever level you're trying to meet them at, which has been a learning experience. I mean, it's been something that I'm learning this campaign, and by the time I do my next campaign or my campaign after that, like it's going to be, I hope I'll have gotten better at it. I hope I'll have learned more. But I certainly don't know everything now. And a lot of what I'm doing now is even just making the contact so that, for Wardens number 2, I can call, hey, Chris, remember when we spoke last time? Like it becomes that conversation, not like, hi, my name is,
Right.
Yeah.
You don't want to keep having that conversation if you can avoid it. Right.
Yeah, and you mentioned a lot about stores. Are you planning on getting this to direct market or working with a publisher down the line with this, or just keeping it on Kickstarter?
So, Wardens is, I think, one of those series that just because it's a 44-page single issue, I don't know how much other publishers will be interested in it. It's also the kind of thing that I've been like in terms of the stories I want to tell, this is more my baby than anything, than any of the other stories. I have another series that I'm working on. My goal is to have 2 series being published like concurrently, and then work on other projects. The other one is a modern horror story that also takes place in Toronto, dealing with it's a magical murder mansion is how I pitch it. It's, everyone gets the house of their dreams, but it requires a certain amount of upkeep. It's called Upkeep. And so that's the kind of story that I think would be really well suited for a small publisher like Mad Cave or Scout or someone like that, or Aftershock, or someone who's like, not Image. I mean, Image, please, like by all means, but like, someone who like another publisher can probably take that and get the ball rolling with it. I think a lot easier. But Warren's is so specific to me in terms of like all the stuff that I feel, at least for issue 1, and as far as I can tell in the future, like I'm probably just going to do it myself. If someone comes in, if Boom says like, hey man, we think Warren's is great, we're going to do issue 2, I won't say no. Like I will never like, I'm not saying I don't want to talk to anyone, but I just think in terms of the specificness of the series and how like local it is and how focused and how much everything like is crafted so finely to be exactly what it is. I'm not sure that it's exactly the right series that someone else would instantly want to pick up. But I could totally be wrong, like maybe someone is like, man, generality out of specificity. Like, the more specific you are, the bigger the message is. That's what I see in this. So we want to tell the story. Like if that's the case, great. But I'm not holding my breath.
Well, I mean, I look at this and it's a little bit the art style leading me that way, but I could see this like in a YA sort of format being really successful too. It's got kind of the history that I think a lot of the people that drive those want to see. And obviously it's appealing, and it's got some great artwork.
If YA people don't mind a lot of swearing in Yiddish, then yeah.
No, okay.
That's my other goal.
I didn't know that.
Because it's fun.
There you go. All right. Well, this is the part of the show where we're going to talk about a little bit what we're doing. You can either hang out with us, or if you need to leave, you can head on out. And we thank you for being on the show, but you are more than welcome to hang out and hear what we got going on.
Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for coming
on. Ben, we've got a whole lot of good stuff going on right now. Let's first talk a little bit about Gemini Mailers, man. We are an official partner for Gemini Mailer. So if you guys go to GeminiComicSupply.com and you make an order and you put in Geek Collective 10 at checkout, you can get 10% off. And I think let's go ahead and pull Ari out of there for us. And then so if you guys go head on over. Okay, here we go. Ari uses mailers. Look at guys. Ari loves Gemini Mailers.
How am I supposed to put this together?
So make sure you guys are going to the website to get your 10% off, because this could save you a heck of a whole lot of money and a heck of a whole lot of pain and headaches, because you want to make sure that your books, because we love these things, we love creating these things so much, we want to make sure that everybody who's backing these things, the 40 backers, want to make sure that they get Warren's #1 in pristine condition. And the way we're going to do that is by using Gemini Mailers, or we love Gemini, so we're going to talk about Gemini here. So make sure you guys go to GeminiComicSupply.com and Geek Collective 10 at checkout to get 10% off. And more stuff that we got going on. Ben, let's talk a little bit about your stuff going on. You got Scarlet Twilight coming up, right?
I do. We have a lot of Scarlet Twilight news. So we have a little bit of the lead into the next Scarlet Twilight story is going to be in our Archetypes book that we mentioned before, and we'll talk about a little more. But the next chapter, Cobalt Crisis, is going to come out probably late this winter, probably April or May, depending. And it's going to be on Zoop. The link is in the description, along with the link for Archetypes and Wardens if you're watching this on YouTube. And I'm going to throw this in the comments as well now again. But basically, this book is if Crisis on Infinite Earths or Secret Wars had been made in the 1940s. So you get your earth-shattering, character-driven epic thing, but you're also getting a lot of that Golden Age storytelling stuff, that pulp feel. all those old great buildings and cars and all the things we like about the Golden Age, with kind of the more epic, modern, epic crossovers. So if any of those are your things, I think you're really going to like this one, and head over to zoop.gg and get in that pre-launch list, and you will hear first when we launch. And one other thing we're going to talk about is Geek Collective. We are working on a magazine kind of inspired by Wizard Magazine and a lot of those old great comics magazines you'd see in the 90s, called Archetypes. It's going to have 3 different comic stories. One of them is mine, and it's a lead into Scarlet Twilight with a new character called Ace Falcon. We have Mother Wolf and Cubs, which is what you see on the cover here. And then we have another story called Beneath the Lighthouse that I'm showing a few pages of here, which is really awesome, black and white kind of suspense story. And in addition to that, Joey, what else do we have? We have some articles. We have some marketing tips.
Yeah, we're gonna have some. We're gonna have some really cool writing tools, writing tips that were from our buddy Adriano over there at Pesto Comics. What he does on X, Twitter, he drops like these daily affirmations for himself, and like he talks about writing tools all day long, right? So he throws those out on Twitter every single day. And it's these really cool tips that he drops out. So I was like, dude, these are so cool. These have been helpful for a lot of people. Can you compile something for us like that? So what he did was he wrote an article literally that takes you, and I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a background here, that literally takes you from beginning to end writing your first issue of a comic book. So you're definitely going to want to check this one out. It's going to be really helpful for people who are just starting out, or somebody who doesn't know the first step to take, right? Because those are one of the first scary things to do, is to take that first step into something that you don't know. So this is going to help people to do that. We also have some tips about. I did a Q&A with with an editor of an Oneshi Press, and I asked Lindsay, which is her name. I asked her about how important press kits are and media kits are. So we talk a little bit about that in there, and she answers a bunch of really cool questions that actually can really help you guys. And there's some really cool tips in there, and you will be able to walk away with having a really cool dynamic media kit that you can send out to media and get some really great coverage for your work. So you're definitely going to want to get it for that as well. We have some cool collaborations with Geek Network, with other geeky places like All Ages of Geek. We're going to have some TTRPG character designs in there, talking to you about how to create some character designs for your TTRPGs. Some really cool articles. We got a really cool article that those guys are going to be doing with some people that are going to be dropping a book from Image. They're going to be announcing that really huge thing, and we're going to have that article in our magazine. So definitely you're going to want to check that out. All you got to do is head on over to geekcollective.net/archetypes and sign up for the pre-order. That's going to drop somewhere in mid-February. We're waiting. Everybody's hitting their deadlines, and as soon as we hit their deadlines, we're hoping to print this thing before we even launch, so that by the time we do launch, we're going to use the funds for the Kickstarter to distribute. And as soon as that money hits, we're going to send it out to you guys, and we're going to send them out in Gemini mailers. I promise you that. So that you guys get those things pristine, clean, and so that you can use these marketing tools and these tools to kind of help your projects get to the next level, or get to a level that you guys would be comfortable with doing this again. So this is going to be something really fun, and we're hoping to do this once a year. And then if we can sustain it, if you guys want it more and more, we're going to try to see if we can do a quarterly periodical. So we'll see how that goes.
Absolutely. Exciting times. So I'm pumped for that, and wrapping up my story hopefully this week, and moving on to colors. So
very cool.
Moving ahead there.
I'm excited about that. I've been loving. Listen, when I hear everybody talking about getting artwork in their emails, I've not been able to feel that till this time. So this is so cool. I love all this stuff. It's been really cool to see everything kind of come together. Very cool. We have 2 articles being edited now, and we're gonna start formatting that here in the next week or two as well. So we've already got one article in edited and formatted, so it's moving, guys, and it's looking gorgeous. So other than that, well, that's all I got. We have this next month is gonna be crazy with Kickstarter. We're gonna have a whole lot of friends that are gonna be coming on. We have a whole lot of Kickstarters to tell you guys about to promote as well. So stay tuned. Hold on to your pants because we're gonna fly. Other than that, please, Ari, let everybody know where they can find you.
You can find me on Instagram at college_st_comics. My webpage is www.arigross.ca. That's ARIGROSS.ca. I'm on Twitter at REBGross. Although, I mean, you can message me, but I'm not active on Twitter too much.
And I can tell you guys, he's not gross. That just sounded weird.
REB Gross. I've lived with it my whole life, so yeah.
Oh man, thank your mom for that one.
Thank my dad, that's for sure.
Ben, where can everybody find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Benjamin W. Morse, Instagram at Benjamin W. Morse _art, and then here every week on Explain Yourself on Sunday nights.
Yeah, fantastic. And you can find me at Joey Galvez 1984 everywhere. And make sure you guys are following myself and Ben and Ari on Kickstarter. You can probably just type in our names and find our Kickstarters that way, and just check them out. And make sure you guys are following us, and all kinds of really cool stuff going on. Make sure you guys are checking us out here every single Sunday at 10 p.m. EST, because we're going to be talking to all kinds of really cool Kickstarter friends coming up very soon. Ben, thanks for hanging out with me every single week. Ari, thank you for coming on. Ben, please play that outro.